Welcome back to the Charlie's Cavalry Show. I'm your host, Sean Malone. Now joined by head men's baseball coach Chris Celano. Coach, how are you today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Let's break down the last week. Let's start one game at a time. First with the Southern Connecticut State game. You guys were able to win and take the series against Southern. Talk about the key points of the game. Let's start with Kyle Cullen and his performances. First two collegiate home runs that he had.
Yeah, that was a game you always want to win. I know that's our crosstown rival, and it holds a lot of weight no matter how either team's doing. And Kyle that day basically carried us on his back. The first one was a situation where the game was definitely still up for grabs. It was 4-2.
That was a much-needed play by him right there.
Yeah, and that I think kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. And then the second one, he came up with runs in scoring position again and was able to hit another one. So he definitely carried us that day.
Talk about what you saw from him from an emotional standpoint hitting those home runs. Obviously last year coming off double hip surgery. Now he's coming into this year. He's getting a starting job. He's hitting the cover off the ball. And now he's hitting it all the way out of the park even too. His first two collegiate home runs. How excited was he after the first and the second home run?
To be honest, in the dugout, I mean, I think he wasn't really overly excited. I don't know that he took it that much different than any other at bats. I think his confidence level probably changed more than anything. But he's a great story. A guy who we didn't have last year and was kind of a question mark coming into this year, and he's taken the most of the opportunity we've given him, and second leading hitter on our team. You can't ask for him to do any more than he is.
You've moved him up to the 5 spot now. At about a week ago, you moved him. Talk about how that has changed him in the games that he's played since.
I think that what that does is when he was hitting in the 9, we kind of used him as another leadoff hitter. Because you can have your 9 guy, and then he follows up by the top of the lineup.
Once the lineup turns over, he's back on top again.
Right. So to us, that's kind of where we wanted him because he's probably the fastest guy on our team. But the way he was swinging the bat, we needed to probably put him in position to drive in more runs. So the 5 spot is definitely conducive to that, and he's delivered since we've done it.
Let's talk about now the weekend's games that you had against St. Rose. You had one game that, if you look quickly, it looks like a football score at the end, 18-14 victory. Yeah. Talk about what went right for your hitters in that game, and also what went wrong for your pitchers in that game.
Offensively, we put up 7 runs in the second inning and had a huge cushion. We kept adding after that, which was good to see because a lot of times you get those big leads and you start to take your foot off the gas. We were able to continue to score, and we earned it. I mean, we hit the ball well that game. From the pitching side of it, I think we got into a position where it was 15-2 or a lead similar to that, and we brought some guys in to get some work and kind of just manage outs. And a couple walks and hit batters later, they're right back in the game. And unfortunately, we had to go to our 8th inning guy and our 9th inning guy in a game that we were one time up.
It was a 2-run game at one point late in the game.
Yes, and actually Jason Lewicki came in and got a huge strikeout for us in the 7th inning, and they were one hit away from tying or potentially going ahead right there.
Henry Hirsch had the start in that game, and he didn't allow many of the runs. I believe he only had 4 earned runs in that game. And he's been doing a good job of late in terms of starting. Talk about him getting more starting time late in the season and the performance he's been putting up.
He's been consistently very well the last probably 3 to 4 starts. He was another guy coming in. We didn't know what we were going to do in terms of having him in the bullpen or in the rotation. But he's very talented physically and has the ability to throw with very good velocity. So we were kind of looking at him as a tail end guy, but he's worked his way into the rotation, and since then he's been fantastic.
I want to know, what is the highest fastball you've ever seen him throw? You mentioned he's got some velocity. I just want to know what his highest miles per hour is.
I've had scouts call me who've seen him. He's been 94 to 96 this year. And I'm not sure where he's been as of late, but he had a stretch there where he was throwing, in that range. So he's garnering a lot of attention from major league guys, and there have been in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 guys for every start to come see him. So it's good for the program, and it's obviously good for him too.
Yeah, usually with those guys that when they're scouting, they see heat, and everyone thinks so long as they can get a little bit of location for him, it's going to be a gold mine. Do you foresee him being drafted in the future, perhaps?
I think so at some point. I don't know that it's this year. I don't know if it's a senior draft. I think time will tell, and how he does down the stretch will, could determine that. Again, I think he's got the intangibles. He's able to throw hard. He's a very physical kid. His body is is the pro type, especially what they look for in pitchers. So I do think he has a very good chance.
Let's go back to the hitting side now. Brendan Buckley injured his shoulder of late, and you gave him a start in the last game at first base. And Joe Romanelli has been replacing him at third. Break down how Romanelli's been doing at third and Buckley at first, their performances.
When we moved Brendan over, we did that after his collision to kind of take the pressure off his shoulder. He banged himself up, but he was swinging a good bat. So we wanted to keep him in the lineup. We knew Joey could play there if needed. Quite honestly, I didn't think he'd be as good as he is. He's
Hasn't played since high school.
Yeah, and he's been fantastic. But I think the key ingredient to all this, too, is TJ Riccio, our freshman catcher, has been able to play behind the plate, which allowed us to even move Joey down to third base. So he was a big piece to that. But all three guys in those spots at this point are playing well, and thankfully, because we needed to take some pressure off Brendan's arm.
Do you have a time frame for Brendan Buckley in terms of when he could be 100% ready to go back at third base every day?
I think it's going to be a day-to-day thing. I think that, with our training staff keeping me updated, it could be as early as the weekend, or it could be sometime after that. But the good news is we have pieces to replace, and it hasn't affected us in a bad way at all.
You have an upcoming 9-game homestand now, all the way until the playoffs begin. Talk about how much of a help you think that might be, being able to stay home, not have to travel late in the year when finals start rolling up, end of the season. How valuable is that to be able to stay home and know that it's going to be easier days, easier game days, minus all the travel?
If you're going to have a long homestand, you want it those last 2 weeks of the season, because usually all the games matter. To a point where it's going to determine seeding for postseason. It could be to get you in postseason. And then you add in all the other things that student athletes have to deal with in terms of classes, final exams, things like that. So I think it's just perfect timing for us to have those 2 weeks at home, the final 2 weeks, especially after grinding it out on the road like we've been doing.
Mm-hmm. What is going to be the key for the final stretch until the playoffs begin?
I think for us, it's about execution. We need to even do a little bit better job than we have been in terms of getting bunts down, doing the little things that kind of help you win. And like I always say, pitching will determine everything. If we continue to pitch well, I like our chances.
Coach, thank you for coming on today.
Great.
That wraps up this episode of the Charlie's Cavalry Show. Tune in next week. We'll once again sit down with the coach, recap the previous week of Charger Sports, and I'll sit down with this week's Athlete of the Week, Catherine Campbell. Thank you for all for tuning in. Good night.